Welcome to selfdiscoverymedia.com, where we discover the communities that are making a difference in the lives of others. Our self-discovery is something we are all making on our life's journey. Here you will find the people that will be your guidance, that will be your inspiration, that will be there for you in support on your journey of life. Do enjoy. Our next show is... Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of An All of This Kiss, right here on selfdiscoverymedia.com. I'm your host, Sarah Troy, and my guest is Lionel Friedberg. This gentleman has been around for a long time. He's a producer, a writer, a cinematographer, director. He has several books which we're going to be talking about because this is part one of part two. There's just too much to cover in one show. He has lived all around the world, South Africa, Canada, now the States. He's done wonderful documentaries. He's just like, there is this book called Full Service, but he's actually, which is a totally different topic, which we will get into because it's about Hollywood's sexual underground. But he's actually done a full service across the whole spectrum of the movie industry and television and everything else. So we're going to, in this first part, really dive into his wonderful career that he has had, on all that he's produced, because it's exciting. You know, why does a producer go for a particular project? What is it like to direct certain people? What are the obstacles that kind of get in the way? You know, what is he drawn to? What kind of, shows is he drawn to actually doing? And, you know, how is it different from television to film? All of this we're going to just dive right into today. And then the next show will come in where we will talk about his books, Forever in Your Veins, Full Service, and The Flying Springbok. And we'll dive right into that and find out all about that as well. So, but first, let's just unravel Lionel's life here. And Lionel, welcome to the show, and honored to have you here.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Now, are you South African born?
I'm South African born, yes.
I lived there for 11 years, an exquisite country. Which part of the country were you in?
I was born in the area around Johannesburg. There are lots of little cities and towns around the Johannesburg area. So I actually grew up in a town called Germiston, just to the south of Johannesburg.
Mm-hmm.
But call me a Johannesburger because that's my beat. You know, that's where I went to school, and that's where we lived. Little small towns, a place called Kempton Park, which is where the big international airport is now. And that's where I developed my love of aviation, which is I eventually wrote a book about the history of the airline there. Because of that, I just fell in love with aircraft when I was a child. So I grew up in the what used to be called the Transvaal. It's
Mm-hmm.
now basically called Gauteng, so Johannesburg is where I come from.
I lived in South Africa for 11 years. I did Johannesburg for around about 5 years collectively. My sister used to live in Randburg, and I lived in Hillbrow. And we used to call it Hellbrow Jailburg, because I was there kind of the late 70s, when a great deal of violence was going on, and you know, the fight, you know, where apartheid was really coming up. Most certainly tumultuous times, but through those times also come incredible stories. And, you know, the fruits of which to be actually able to produce something. Were you in TV or movies when you were in South Africa?
Well, I grew up in South Africa and I had my education in South Africa. And then my parents eventually, for a number of reasons, uh, we'd had enough of the apartheid era.
Mm-hmm.
And I was an only child. My mother was born in South Africa. My father was originally from Latvia. And he was very conscious of the racial injustices that were going on in South Africa. And he had a whole string of business partners who weren't particularly honest. And he said, you know, enough. I've had
Yes.
enough of this.
Yes.
And so he decided to move, and he moved to a little country called Northern Rhodesia, which is today
Mm-hmm.
Zambia. And he went up there to run a little store right on the border of the Congo. And it was at the time that the Congo War was raging.
Right.
And everybody
Yes.
thought he was absolutely crazy. And he said, no, I'm getting out of here. And yeah, I'm getting out of South Africa. I'm going to live up there in an area called the Copperbelt, some of the richest copper mines in the world are located up there. And so he moved, and I thought, I'm not staying here. I decided to follow them. And when I arrived there, I'd finished my education, and my parents said, "You've got to go to university." However, I had a weakness. And my weakness was the fact that my mother was an avid cinema fanatic. She loved going to the movies. So she took
I'm
me
right
to
with
see
her.
my first film when I was 4 years old. It was an Esther Williams movie. I think it was Bathing Beauty.
Mhm,
And I fell in love with the movies. And all I wanted to do was to make films.
mhm,
So I started making films as a child when I was 11 years old. And when my parents were moved up to northern Rhodesia, I thought, oh my God, here is my opportunity to make The African Queen and King Solomon's Mines and all of those wonderful adventure movies that I loved. Now's my chance to do that. And when I arrived there and looked around, there was nothing. It was a completely undeveloped country with a series of copper mines. There was nothing for me to do at all. And I thought, what have I done?
mhm,
So my
mhm.
parents said, go back to South Africa, go and get yourself a university education. And I was very reticent to do that until I read the newspaper one day. There was a local newspaper on the Copperbelt called the Northern News. And there was a little tiny thing in there that said, um, it was almost an advertisement for staff. We're looking for staff for the new television station. And I thought, oh my God, this is manna from heaven. I
Mhm,
responded to the ad. I had my interview, and they said, everybody who's going to work at this new television station that we're starting are coming either come from the UK or from Europe or from Southern Rhodesia.
mhm,
At that time, Northern Rhodesia was part of a federation. There was the Northern Rhodesia, there was Southern Rhodesia, named after Cecil Rhodes, the
mhm.
great imperialist and entrepreneur. And then there was Nyasaland, which is today in Malawi. So those three countries were a federation. Southern Rhodesia did have television. Northern Rhodesia did not. So they got their staff from Southern Rhodesia and from London. But there were a couple of little minor jobs that were available. And thank heavens I got one of those, as in the props department,
Mhm,
looking after
mhm.
little things of soap and cocoa and things for the advertising shows that we did. And so that's how my career began. It was the very first television station in Central Africa. And after 6 months, because I had been making movies since I was 11, I knew
Right.
all about making movies, didn't I? I mean, I knew everything about. And I went to the manager of the station. I said, Mr. Salmon, he was a retired army captain, and I said, Mr. Salmon, unless you give me a job as a cameraman, I'm leaving. And he kind of liked me, and I think everybody sort of depended on me because I was kind of creative. If we
Mhm,
we had live advertising shows, and
mhm.
for example, if there was a live show for advertising ice cream, you couldn't have ice cream because you couldn't keep it fresh. You
Right.
couldn't keep it. So I had a way of inventing props that looked like ice cream and things like that. That's just one tiny example. So a dishcloth covered in soap powder with a little marble at the top with motor oil running over the side looked like a dish of ice cream.
It doesn't sound appetizing.
I was inventive, and they thought, well, this guy's good. And
Mhm,
when I said, I don't want to do this anymore, I want to be behind that camera. And Ian Salmon said to me, or we'll give you a chance. And they put me behind one of the cameras for the morning educational broadcasts. We had broadcasts in the morning for kids,
mhm,
and we had afternoon programs for local tribal people in the vernacular languages and tribal dances and all sorts of
mhm,
wonderful things. So I was exposed to this incredible culture. And at night, it was for the white audiences where we had British shows,
mhm.
American shows, and some local dramas. And so I was good behind the camera. And that's how my career began. So I did that for a couple of years until independence came along, and then it was decided by Kenneth Kaunda and the United National Independence Party, who are now the party in power. This is now the Federation had broken up. Britain was giving all these territories away.
Mhm,
Northern Rhodesia was now going to become Zambia.
mhm.
And it was decided that all the white staff at this little television station in a tiny town called Kitwe had to leave because they were going to be replaced by local people, which is
Mhm.
correct. And we had to train local people. It was called Zambianization. And I thought, but that's all very well. What do I do once I've trained them to do my job? What am I going to do?
Yes.
And so it was kind of, in a way, kind of traumatic. But there lies a story, because we had a wonderful servant at home. Everybody had a servant
Mhm.
out there. I mean, and these were colonial times.
Yes.
Everybody had a servant. So we had a boy. Well, of course, he was a young man. He wasn't a boy. But anyway, that's the term that we used those days. And I said to him, David and I were great friends, and he loved photography. And I was teaching him how to use his little camera. We gave him a camera for Christmas one year. And we were sitting under the mango tree one afternoon on one of my off days. And I said, David, I have to leave. I've got to probably have to go back to South Africa. And he said, that's terrible. Why? And I said, because my job has been given to a local person. I've been made redundant. What am I going to do? He said, no, you mustn't go back to South Africa. So I said, well, what am I going to do? And he said, we'll go and ask someone who will know. And he took me to see a sangoma. A sangoma is basically what we would those days used to call a witch doctor,
Mm-hmm.
a diviner, a soothsayer, a herbalist, a medicine person. And it was a woman, and she was an albino woman who lived on the outskirts of town in the middle of nowhere. And David and I went to see her, and he interpreted what she said, what she told me. And she used bones. She
Mm-hmm.
threw bones on the floor, and as the bones scattered, the paradigm in the African tradition is the bones will lay in a certain order, and it is the ancestors who make them fall in this particular order
Right.
and will tell the future. Do you know that every single thing that little albino woman who didn't speak a word of English told me has come true in
Mm-hmm.
the last 60
Mm-hmm.
years? And that is the through line of the first book that I that we'll talk about later on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was quite incredible. So my future was sort of mapped out by what this woman told me, but I had no option but to go back to South Africa. So I went back to South Africa and got a job in the film industry. And but my ambition was always to work in Hollywood, which is where I live now.
Mm-hmm.
And I always wanted to live in LA, because why? Because this is where Esther Williams and people like that live.
Yes, of course.
And my absolute ambition as a child was always to make movies. One day I remember when after I saw this movie with my mother, I was, as I said, I was 4 or 5 years old, and I said to my mom afterwards, I said, "Wow, she's amazing." Oh, and there was also Carmen Miranda was in that film,
Oh,
the lady with
mhm.
the fruit on her head.
Yes, yes,
And I
remember her.
said, "Where does she live?" And my mother said, "Oh, I think in America." It was the very first time I ever heard the name, the word America. I was a kid. I was a little
Yeah,
child.
right.
I started school. And I thought, that's where I want to go. And I want to do exactly what those people do. I want to make movies with Carmen Miranda and Esther Williams. That's what I want to do. That was my life's dream.
Yes.
So once I was made redundant in Zambia, I returned to South Africa, got a job in the film industry. And they were really wonderful, exciting, amazing years, because we had to be very innovative. We were so far away from the
Yes.
technology of Hollywood and the film industry of the UK and America, wherever else. So we had to be very innovative. But we did quite well. And, we managed to make some pretty good stuff in South Africa. And they were wonderful years. But my dream was still to come to Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, with apartheid raging, it was
Yes.
very difficult to emigrate to the United States. And I thought, well, then I'm going to do the next best thing. I'm going to go to the closest place that I can. And so I emigrated to Canada, which was one of the most wonderful things I did. The Canadians gave me a visa without any hesitation. They were absolutely wonderful. And I arrived in Montreal not knowing a soul, not knowing a word of French, and I got a job with the National Film Board in Montreal. Office National du Film. I remember, I think it was in Notre Dame de Grange in Montreal. It was just wonderful, wonderful, a wonderful opportunity. And the Canadians were just absolutely fantastic.
Mm-hmm. What
And
year was that, Lionel?
1966.
Mm-hmm.
And what I arranged through the National Film Board was an exchange scheme for me to come to Hollywood for a short while to learn the business, and then I would go back to Canada. And so they very kindly arranged that. The National Film Board, the twain did not meet between the French and English departments those days. There was an
Mm.
English camera
Yeah.
department and there was a French camera department. And there was an English cafeteria and there was a French
Oh
cafeteria.
no, a different form of apartheid.
Exactly. I was amazed.
Yes.
And so the head of the English camera department, Dennis Gilson was his name, a lovely man. He arranged for me to come to LA and work at some of the major studios here, which I did. So I got on a Greyhound bus and spent 5 days coming all the way to California. And then I started working in the industry here for a while and then went back to Canada. And I'll just cut a very, very long story short. My father became very ill. And as an only child, I felt very
Mm.
responsible. I had to go back and be with my mother. And so I returned to Africa. And once I had returned to Africa, it would have been very difficult for me to have made the move back to North America again because my father was extremely ill. And he eventually passed away from lung cancer.
Mm.
And so I felt that I had to stay. So I ended up in South Africa. And that's where I eventually got married, had my first two children, and so on and so forth. And from there, my career really began in the movie industry.
Mhm. I was engaged to a young man who was a sound guy in the
Yes.
movies, Dan Vessels. This would have been in the 70s. And I remember being on a few movie sets and sometimes kind of being the extra or filling in for a spot. But the trouble is, it was all Afrikaans, which, they're trying to get me to say something and I'd say it very Britishly, So, but it was always fun, on those all night because what people don't understand when they see a TV show or a movie full of action, they don't, why does it take so long to make it? Because there's so much of hurry up and wait. Got to wait for the right light or the right situation or the right this or the right that. And then there's a few takes. And so they don't realize there's more sitting around than there is actually doing anything, which, obviously when you're in the theater, you press on and you're on until the end, which is a totally, different paradigm there. But yes, I remember quite a number of movies being made in South Africa, um, including The Gods Must Be Crazy. Do you remember that?
Oh, of course, that's become a classic
Oh,
in its own right.
fabulous movie. If people haven't seen it, please go and see it. It's about a Coca-Cola bottle falling from the sky and these
Yes,
guys thinking it's
yes,
it's evil, and it's just hilarious. It
yes,
really is.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. It's a
Um,
wonderful and made by a wonderful man called Jamie Ace, who was the first filmmaker in South Africa to make films, first one to make films in Afrikaans, and I knew Jamie. He passed away, but Jamie made that film, and it's really become a classic all
yeah,
over the world. Mm.
yeah. Yeah, and you just can't help but laugh, but at the same time, it's just showing such a beautiful, simple culture,
Yes,
because, when people think of South Africa, they just really think of the struggle of apartheid.
yes,
I left in 80,
yes.
and it took me 5 years for me to get my papers in Canada
Ah,
because I still had uh, permanent residency in South Africa. I
ah,
had to go and get a new passport as a British subject and
mm,
apply all over again because that. And I said, but I've left. It's still being penalized for living there. So I was
yeah.
caught right up in the swirl of that time.
But
But,
you did have your British passport, of
I
course.
did have a British passport and I had
Yeah.
permanent residency stamped in it, but they deliberately lost my papers 3 times.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was a mum whose father worked in the consulate who just said, they toss your papers out because you have permanent residency in there.
Yes.
And there's new passport, new clean papers.
Uh,
And I finally got back in here because I was married with 2 kids at that time, and the kids
uh-huh.
could have come back in, but not me. So that
Uh,
was, that was always the challenge. But South Africa, I remember the movie business, and of course, also in '77 when the TV
mm-hmm.
opened up, and
Yeah.
it was Afrikaans one night, English another. And I remember Tuesdays, all of the theaters only starting their plays at 9 o'clock because I think Dynasty or
Yes.
was
That's,
on earlier. Nobody would go to the theater until Dynasty was over.
it's probably the days of Dallas, because Dallas,
Yes,
the
yes,
whole country came to a standstill for
yes,
Dallas. Remember that? Yeah.
yes. I do, I do, and of course, the Afrikaans, but all the other great shows. and
Yeah,
dubbed them, right? So,
dubbed them. Yes, dubbed them. Somebody once asked me, the television service actually began on the 5th of January, 1976,
mhm,
in South Africa. And I joined a company in 1974 that got a contract to do a lot of documentaries for the television network, for the SABC. And the very first series I got to do was a history of all of the tribes of South Africa, which I
mm,
did with an anthropologist by the name of Peter Becker, a remarkable man. And I got to know all the local tribes and their cultures in and out.
yeah.
It was an extraordinary experience, but that's another story. But somebody, one of my friends from abroad once said, well, how many channels do you have in South Africa? And I said, a half, because,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
English alternated with the Africans.
I know. I didn't bother getting a TV in South Africa. I was still very much enjoying the life. And if I wanted to watch them, I'd go to someone else who had it. Um, but yeah, it was rather pathetic when it first came out. Um, and but there was then the challenge, wasn't it, to start making for South African TV, start, really producing your own material.
Yeah,
So that must have opened up a lot of doors there.
huge, absolutely huge. It suddenly created an industry
Hmm.
that really didn't exist before that. But they had 5 years to do that. I learnt about the introduction of television in South Africa. We had the Minister of Post and Telegraphs in South Africa was a man by the name of Albert Herzog. He had a little white beard and obnoxious little man. And the South Africans used to call the cinema, movies, the
Yes.
bioscope,
Hmm.
because when the movies first came to South Africa, the first projector that arrived was a hand crank thing during the silent era, and it
Yes.
was made by a company here in America, and it was called the bioscope. So everybody in South Africa, right up until the 90s, used to refer to the movies in South Africa as the bioscope.
Hmm.
And so people had been asking for years and years and years, let's have television. But this little Minister of Post and Telegraphs was in charge of broadcasting. And he said, I'm not going to have that little bioscope in the corner of our lounges where the world can see how we can see how corrupt the world is. Of course, they wanted to keep away from the populace, particularly black viewers,
Right.
how the
Yes.
rest of the world lived. God
Hmm.
forbid that people should see that whites and blacks can get on peacefully, right?
Yes.
They didn't
Yes.
want that to happen. So they kept it away. But eventually they couldn't hold back progress. And I was boarding a jet aircraft in Tokyo in 1971, and I bought Time magazine. And I got on board the plane when I was going to fly to Australia, and I opened it up, and there was this article announcing the introduction of television in South Africa. Well, I couldn't believe it because it had been denied for all these years.
Right.
And that's how I learned about it. So the country had 5 years to prepare. And I have to tell you that they got the best technical equipment in the world, modeled on the British PAL system, the phase alternating line color system,
Mm-hmm.
way better than the North American system was back in those days. And they built an incredible broadcasting center in Johannesburg at Auckland Park with the latest and the best in every bell and whistle imaginable. And but what that did was it allowed so many people to suddenly find a career in the film industry,
Yes.
either producing drama shows in English or Afrikaans. But I wanted to concentrate at that time on documentaries. I had spent my most of my time photographing feature films, but I fell in love with documentaries. And so I had all these marvelous opportunities. And the company that I was with in Johannesburg, Independent Film Center, we specialize in documentaries. And they were a wonderful, wonderful bunch of people. So we made all these amazing shows. And we were churning it out left, right, and center, documentaries by the dozen. And they were wonderful days.
And the thing about documentaries, like a good book or a good story, they don't die. They may have taken you up to a certain time period, but the knowledge of what you learned from that documentary, it's just something that can continue to live on.
Yes, yes. Things do date, but aside from that,
Hmm.
and the good thing about working on documentaries is that you have the privilege of entering people's lives that very few people, other people have the opportunity of doing. You take the people's lives apart like this, an onion skin. You
Yes.
just eat it away. You get to the kernel of what people are about and what they do and how they live. Whether it's about how you make matchboxes, or
Mhm.
whether it's about some huge social issues, or whatever it is, you have to get to the core of it. And it's a wonderful process. It's absolutely marvelous
Yeah.
because you really do learn a lot. And then your job as a filmmaker is to impart that to your audience.
Yes,
And it's
in an invitational way where they're quite happy to peel back another layer and get more and more intrigued, and
yes,
then have that aha moment when you actually get to the core of everything. So
that's right.
it's having people immersed in it, isn't it? I mean, that's the reason
Yeah,
why we go to movies, is
yeah.
that we want to be immersed. Sometimes it's escapism, sometimes it's that transforming you into space, but very, very often we want to see ourselves somewhere in there.
Hmm.
We want to see an image of what we would like to be or a realization of what we are. And that's why movies speak to us so much, whether it's a documentary or whether it is, just a fictional. Most
Yes.
fictionals, though, always end up being slightly factual along the way. And
Hmm.
as we were saying, 2020, if you wrote it as fiction, nobody would ever believe it was fact. So
Yes.
it's going
Yeah.
to be interesting what filmmakers make in the future of 2020.
I am dying to see what is going to become of
Yeah.
this year
Yes.
in terms of feature films, in
Yeah.
terms of dramatic films, and in terms of documentaries.
Hmm.
Looking back on this year is going to be quite something.
Yeah. And 20 years, they're going to think that it's fictional. No, that couldn't have happened in 1 year.
Yeah.
The
It really
year, but
was. This was the year that the world changed. It's changed so much about the planet. The way we live, the way we interact, the way we go about our lives, the way
yeah.
we educate ourselves, the way we go about our business. I mean, it really has been an extraordinary year in so many ways, and not always in a good way at all, but just a very, very. I mean, I know people who've lived through the Blitz in England, and
Hmm.
or whether one has lived through the apartheid era, but nothing compares to what this year has been all about.
No, I was given a saying about 2.5 years ago that the universe is going to shake us up, to wake us up, for us to step up and change it up.
That's what it did.
And
Yes,
it's doing it. We've been shaken, we've been woken,
yes,
we've been asked to step up
yes,
because that's the only way we're going to change it up. And, basically it
absolutely.
was the universe and the planet got together and said, look, we've got to do something with these humans,
Mm,
because they're destroying us. And so we
absolutely.
need to shake them up. So,
When you go outside in LA or any major city, and you look up at the sky, and the sky's blue again, and
mm,
it's clean again, and there are no vapor trails, and there's
right,
no noise, and there's no pollution up there. There's no air traffic.
right.
Wonderful. The planet has been given a chance to breathe again, you
And
know,
let us know that it doesn't need us.
and it doesn't need us.
Yes.
And the traffic has been cut down. I
Yeah.
mean, the congested freeways of LA, which are notorious,
Uh,
the traffic is now a tenth of what it used to be.
yep.
So we're polluting less, and we're not sitting in traffic jams all the time. So the planet has got a chance to get its breath back again.
Right. Right. And also, if, although we are supposed to be kind of, and if not isolating, but bubbling, with a small group of people, this medium, which I've been doing for a few years, it has now become a mainstream. And what
Yeah,
I love to see when you watch TV or any of the shows, talking head shows,
yeah,
is where it used to be studio, 2 or 3 minutes, just
mm,
catching the surface. Now everybody's in their own homes, they're more relaxed, forget about the makeup and the hair, you're seeing them as they are, and we're
yeah,
having more honest conversations. I think it's
yeah,
going to be very hard for them to go back to the superficial. Because we've
that's true.
really opened up more to the depth, which is what we're hungry for.
Yes. Well, that's right. It speaks to the fact that we've run out of time. There's no time to do anything. Everybody's running. Everybody's running all
Yes,
the time. Everybody's in a hurry. We slow down. That's what you've been saying now. I
yes,
mean, you can get into a topic. You can get into a
yes,
topic, even though it's through a Zoom screen like we're doing right
right,
now. But at least you can talk to someone instead of, oh, I got to go, I got to go, I got to go.
yeah,
We got a chance to get to know one another,
right,
even though it's remotely. And I
yes.
think that that's that is going to make a difference as well.
Yeah.
I just worry about what worries me more than anything else is how children are not being given the opportunity to get a decent education this way, because
Mm,
you really do need a classroom, and you need a teacher, and you need one-on-one communication, you need you need that interaction,
yes.
and children are being denied that at the moment, and what that worries me terribly. I have a daughter in Chicago. She's got two boys, and they would much rather be in school,
Yes.
being schooled at home through a screen. It's
Yeah, I know.
very difficult.
But I mean, let's refer this to wartime. We're not worrying about bombs. We're not worrying about, somebody bashing down our door or taking us off to a camp.
Yes,
It's back in those days there was no luck if they had radio,
yes,
no TV, and even less access to books, or a lot of other things. Even going out the door
yeah,
was, and so we have to put things in perspective and go, okay,
mm,
this is the sacrifice at the moment. What are
mm,
the benefits that can come out of this? And I think
yeah,
it's a new way of expressing ourselves, a new way of reaching out. We now have virtual coffee mornings,
yes,
or people have the glass of wine, and meet people. And it's, yes, no, you're not in the same room, but it doesn't mean you're not on the same frequency.
oh,
Um,
absolutely, absolutely. That's so true. That is so true. You know, I have lots of friends here that were writers and filmmakers and whatever else. And one of the many groups that my wife and I belong to now is what we call the COVID Classic Film Group.
mm,
And we get together once a week, like we are now, and we discuss a classic movie. We look at the film,
mm,
usually back from the 30s or 40s or 50s, and then we get together and we analyze it and we take it
right.
apart
Lovely. Yes.
and we
Instead
talk
of a
about.
book club, a film club.
It's exactly
Yes.
like a book club, but it's a film club,
Yeah.
yes. Because we're all movie people here, so we love to look at old movies and look at the cinematography and talk
Yes.
about underscoring the music
Yes.
and the writing and the performances and film noir, various genres of film, and it's really quite wonderful to be able to do that.
I mean, you think about the old black and white.
Ah,
The
yeah.
the shadowing of the light, of how
Oh,
sinister it could be.
absolutely.
The music just at that right time.
Mm.
It could be petrifying. Somebody could just be walking and you just see the shadow and the music staring up, and something's coming. I mean, Psycho for one. you know
Example,
it's they got you. I think I'm a 54 child, so I grew up with the black and white movies before we more went to color in the late 60s.
yes,
Um, and I remember watching these black and white movies and going upstairs with my back against the wall. I'm absolutely petrified, thinking somebody's going to, jump out at me, because they stayed with you. They really knew how to be sinister, or they really knew how to set the stage.
yes,
I love watching them today,
yes,
because they still kind of, some of them are, Perry Mason,
yes.
I live with an 87-year-old, and she loves the original Perry Mason, and they remade a Perry Mason, which I do like, but
Hmm.
for her, it's not Perry.
No,
It's not her Perry.
right,
But, they were formatted, weren't they? It was very similar template to everything what they did, and
right,
based on
yes,
the charisma,
yes,
of the people. But
right.
I think, that a lot of people just want to look forward, but I think your best performance is forward if you appreciate what's been done in the past.
You have to know that. You have
Yes.
to know where you're going. You've not got to know where you've been,
Yes.
and that applies to so many things, uh, particularly the arts.
Yes. I mean, look at the arts and the movies and things that have stayed with us. I mean, Psycho, even,
Uh-huh.
today is still talked about. And I
Mm.
love Mel Brooks's Psycho with the newspaper in the shower. I mean, he was a true artist. He really was.
Hysterical, yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And but you look at, I mean, I'm a Star Wars fan. I went
Are
to
you
see,
really?
oh,
Okay.
I love my Star Wars, and I love space. I love, things that take us some other place that we have not yet gone, or, is possible to go.
Yeah,
And I love a good murder mystery. I
uh,
don't like slashing,
yeah,
kill for the sake of kill.
yeah,
I like a good intrigue murder mystery that you have to unravel.
right.
And I think it's very good for our psyche to have a good performance. I think it takes us out of ourselves. I think it also helps show us ourselves, even by our reactions to what we're seeing.
Hmm.
I think it opens up conversation.
Yeah.
But I also think it gives us more insight into life in itself. So it's not just escapism, it's really a different form of education, isn't it?
Well, it's a window to who we
Mm,
are.
yeah,
It really is that. And one, it makes you, it allows you to be, uh, um, to analyze yourself and to look into yourself and look at yourself in the mirror and, understand a little bit more about who you are. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's very important for us to know,
yeah.
what makes us tick, and how, uh, and life is so marvelously complicated. But just to talk about the arts very briefly, you were talking about black and white, and you were talking about the scariness of things. My wife and I have just made a film. We've always, I love uh, music in the movies, and
Mm,
ever since
hmm.
I saw, um, I think the first film that did it for me was probably the Ten Commandments back in 1956. Um,
Charlton Heston.
Charlton
That's,
Heston,
yeah.
and since then I've worked with Charlton Heston, and and made a documentary about Cecil B. DeMille and the whole DeMille
Mm,
dynasty for American Movie Classic. So but what happened was in 1956 when I saw the Ten Commandments as a child, I was what was I? I was 12 years old, and I was watching this epic film unfold, and I suddenly realized, what am I hearing here? I'm not only listening to the dialogue, I'm hearing something else. And I suddenly became aware of the music,
mm,
which normally people don't even listen to. It's there, it's an
yes,
underscore, it
right.
supports the emotion,
Hmm.
it manipulates your emotions, but we're not aware of it. And I suddenly became aware of this music doing this to me.
Yeah.
And that's how I developed this passion for film music.
Mm,
And when my wife and I eventually met, we had this interest in common, a love of film music. And so she always wanted to, my wife Diana, she always wanted to make a film about the first man to underscore a dramatic film in Hollywood. And he was a man by the name of Max Steiner.
hmm.
Max Steiner he originally came from Austria, came to this town, and when he arrived in Hollywood in the 30s, I beg your pardon, in the 20s, the talkies were just beginning
Right.
to happen. Warner Brothers had just made The Jazz Singer, and so that changed the whole nature
Yes.
of the business, of course. And the idea was, at that time there was no music in the movies at all, because if you put music in the movies, the audience, the feeling at the time for the producers was, well, where's the music coming from? If the audience doesn't see the orchestra, where's this music coming from? Until somebody once said, well, if that's the case, then where's the camera coming from?
Right.
And so Max Steiner and David O. Selznick, who produced Gone with the Wind, they
Mm,
said, let's change the industry. Let's
yes.
use music as an underscore behind the drama. You don't have to see the band. You
No,
don't have to see the orchestra.
no,
You don't have to see the zither or the accordion or the piano.
no.
It's there. Let
It's
it
the
do
atmosphere,
what
isn't it?
it said. And so we have made this film called The Maestro of the Movies, and it's the whole history of how music has played a role in the film industry. And it's
Mm,
been an amazing topic. We're in the process at the moment of trying to negotiate with Warner Brothers the rights to use excerpts from their films. But with this lockdown that we're going through at the,
right, yes.
I mean, everybody, is basically not in their office. And so it's taking a long time to get permission. But when that film comes out, I think it's going to be quite interesting for people to see how all this came about, how it began, and
Mm,
how it developed over the years until we have the John Williamses of today and the Star Wars of today, all because of Max Steiner.
yes. And you know how much music, the influence it has. I mean, you
Yes,
could take the dialogue out and the music itself can tell the story, but
absolutely.
it enhances the story. It sets the stage for the actor of the next scene. It's so a part of the story that keeps our emotions going. and just something that's kind of almost like silence undertone, and then there's a pitch and you can jump out of your seat.
Yeah. And of course, the other thing that music can do is, you can have a very, very bland, very ordinary scene about someone walking down a sidewalk,
Yeah.
and the music can say to you something really bad is going to happen.
Yes.
And it's the music that does that to you.
Yes.
Or if you take the music away, you don't know that that's going to happen. And when it does happen, then the music can make it even worse. So music plays an incredible role. There are two sides to a film. And I've always said that to people. It's not a visual medium. It is audio and it's
Yes.
video, and it's equal share. They are
Yes.
equally important.
Yes.
And people don't realize that. There was a master filmmaker by the name of David Lean, who's one of my heroes. David Lean made marvelous films, including Bridge on the River Kwai, Lawrence of
Mm,
Arabia,
mm,
which, as far as I'm concerned, is one of the finest films ever made.
mm.
And David Lean, Ryan's Daughter was an epic film that he made in the 60s.
In South Africa, I remember that.
They shot the film in Ireland. It's set in Ireland.
Oh, is it Ireland? But I thought they did it in South Africa.
They shot it in Ireland. And
Oh, okay.
when the weather turned against them in Ireland, they had to finish the film. So where
Right.
did they finish it? The only place to finish it was to go to South Africa,
Yes.
to the beaches of the Cape, where you have these wonderful stormy Atlantic
Mm,
oceans and all that. But it was never said that it was shot in South Africa because it was
right.
the height of
Well,
apartheid.
the reason I know it was shot there because my brother was walking our dog on the
Yes.
beach when they were filming, and they were
Oh,
trying to chase the dog off because it was
oh,
in the
yeah.
scene.
Yes.
So that's why I remember
Well, MGM did everything they can to hide the fact that they finished the film in South
that.
Africa.
Right. Yes. That's the reason I know is because, the dog tried to get in the picture. So that's why I remember it well there.
And David
Um,
Lean was a master of sound. If you look at his film, Great Expectations, as an example,
the original one.
the original one,
Hmm.
the little child goes to the cemetery. The little boy goes to the cemetery. And this is where he meets the thief who's escaped from the prison
Right.
at the beginning of the story. I don't know if people are familiar with it, but that's how the movie begins. This little
Hmm.
guy, this little child, lives in some Irish small town in England, and he's confronted by this man who's escaped from a prison.
Hmm.
But what David Lean does is he terrifies you
Yes.
because you hear the trees creaking, you
Yes.
hear the leaves rustling, and you hear the wind blowing, and there's no music. He uses
Yeah.
nature for sound. He was a master at that sort of thing. So, uh, you know, um, that's just to come back again to it's a medium that relies on the audio as well as the video
To tell the
input.
story.
Yeah.
Yes. Did you see the movie August Rush?
Remind me.
It's a young boy who is in an orphanage, and he knows his parents are out there, and he is a prodigy. He literally hears music from the corn, from the wind, from anything, and he
Yeah.
actually ends up in a school producing, his own piece. But Robin Williams gets hold of him,
Uh,
and he can play this guitar very, because of the way he hears sound, and
yes.
it's a story back to his parents, but it is so beautiful.
Mm,
And the way that he hears the sounds of everything, just the cars driving over the potholes,
yeah.
the horns, everything turns into music for him.
Of course.
And I recommend it if you haven't seen it. It is a lovely movie.
Yeah. That sounds like my kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't think I have seen it. Yeah. Yeah. And I love when those elements are used like that,
Yes.
like you've just
Yes.
described them.
Yes. Yeah, it's there's certain instruments that just kind of are mesmerizing. That they
Mm,
they, they themselves are the storytelling, and they can really lead you on the path and prepare you for what is to coming,
oh yeah.
and also calm you down because if you've had a scare, you
Mm,
don't want the audience having a heart attack. You now need to calm them down, and it's not the scene because people are in shock for what's going on in the
yeah.
scene. It's the music that brings them back down, isn't it?
Yeah. One of my little crazy things, and I've done a lot of crazy things in my time, but there was a time when I would walk around everywhere with a tape deck around my shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
And I would go in the tubes in London and I
Yes,
would record the doors closing, and I would record the sound of the tracks, the train on the tracks.
yes,
I would record general ambient sound on the sidewalks. I would go out into a field and just record the distant sound of wind, whatever. Because for me, it's all music.
Yeah. Oh, I'm
You
with
know,
you. Yes.
it's all
Yes.
music. Nature is music.
There's
There is
nothing like the
echo.
rustling of the trees as you're walking down, as the wind is going through them.
It's a
You know,
symphony. It's a
yes,
symphony.
the splash of the water against the shore.
It's a
You know,
symphony. Yes.
yeah, I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. Yes, it's nature is a beautiful orchestra. Not many people pay attention to it.
No,
Uh,
we don't, and I wish people did, but people don't hear. They don't, and nobody looks up, and that really,
yeah, no,
you know,
because they're so busy,
yeah,
looking down
yeah,
on their
yeah.
phones that
The
they've
very first
forgotten
thing
what's
I
around
do,
them.
I go out the front door at night. The very first thing I do, I look at the sky.
Yes.
What is this? What is the stars doing tonight?
Yeah.
What is it? What is the sky tonight?
Yes.
You have to know that, and you have to sense your connection with all of that, and it gives you this. This gives you your cosmic place. It's so
Yes.
important.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It is. We're divine creatures having a human experience.
No question whatsoever about that.
But so many people are stuck in just the human experience, and they haven't let that divine in, and that divine is speaking to them through every rustle of every leaf, for every bird in the sky, for every bit of wind, for every water that is rippling out there. It is around us, in us, through us all the time. But people are constantly out there searching for some sort of stimuli, and the stimuli is all around you if you just open up your heart and spirit and allow it in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's so true. And if you can translate that
Mm,
that you have just described into a scene or into a movie, you're doing miraculous and marvelous and wonderful things.
yeah. Did
Uh,
you
it,
like The Sixth Sense?
the movie,
Yes.
yes, I did. I loved the film,
Mm,
absolutely. And of course, the final line, you know, I was waiting. I saw that. I was working on a big National Geographic series called The Shape of Life in Monterey. And the studio was right next to the big Monterey Aquarium because we had a natural history unit and we were doing a lot of natural history filming. And I was living in Monterey for about a year working on that series. And one night I decided I'm going to the movies tonight, and I went to go and see The Sixth Sense. And while I was waiting for the show to start, the previous show was coming out, and this little guy came out and he said to his dad, as he came out of the door, he said to his dad, "Oh, so he was dead all the time." He gave it all away.
Oh, well, being one of those weird children that used to grow up speaking to dead people, for me, it was an
Yeah,
epiphany. I
yeah.
see dead people. I'm like, I'm not the only one. you know.
Well,
But
I'll tell you something, Sarah. I made a show for I do believe I think it was either A&E Arts and Entertainment Network or maybe Discovery Channel. I don't remember. Somewhere in the 90s, called Beyond Death. It was a
mm,
2 hour special. And basically it wasn't about ooga booga and
right.
seances and things that go bump in the night. This was the brief was go and find out, is there any scientific proof of the fact that the soul or the spirit or the consciousness survives the demise of the human body? In other words,
Mhm.
what happens to your soul?
Right.
What happens to your
Yes.
consciousness? What happens to the real you
When the vessel goes.
when your body
Yes.
stops working? Yeah. And that was what the movie was all about. Well, I tell you, it was one of the most extraordinary experiences of my life because
What's it called again?
it was called Beyond Death, and you can actually see it on YouTube. Um, Beyond Death is the title of the show, and I met the most extraordinary people during the making of that, including a woman who was clinically dead because she had a brain tumor and they had to stop her heart.
Hmm.
She was basically clinically dead. Her brain was dead. So her blood was going through this machine, but in actual fact, she had died. And yet she traveled outside of her body.
Hmm.
And she related this experience. And nobody believed her when she came around afterwards. And she
Right.
said she remembers things. Her surgeon said, yeah, yeah, yeah. And she said, yes, but what about the time when the nurse dropped that instrument and you shouted at her? And he said, what? How do you know that? And she said, because I saw you. I was
Right.
on the ceiling looking
Yes.
down. And
Yes.
he said, really? And what else did you see? And she said, well, you had a tape deck in the corner because the surgery took place for about 5 hours.
Mhm.
And I can tell you all the songs that you had playing. And he couldn't believe this. And so
Right.
I interviewed the surgeon, I interviewed her, and everybody else who was part of that procedure. That woman actually had an out of body experience.
Right. I've
And
had them myself, and
you have,
it's
yeah.
yes.
You know,
I
when,
actually went into a coma when I was in labor with my son.
ah,
And I remember being up there and thinking, oh, I'm fine. I'm peaceful. Leave me alone. This is wonderful. I'm out of the body.
yeah,
And they're slapping my face and they're trying to get me to come around. And then they inject me with something and I can kind of feel myself coming back into my body going, no.
yeah, yeah.
But I'm also a dimensional traveler. So,
Oh, you are. Okay. Well,
yes.
very interesting. I belong to a very interesting group of people here called the Galactics.
Hmm.
And we get together. Now we can only do it on the Zoom screen,
Hmm.
but we usually get together once a month and we have dinner together and then we talk about this kind of thing.
Yes.
We talk about, near death experiences. We talk about life after death. We talk about all sorts of things. The parallel universe is there,
Yeah.
the,
Yes.
the paranormal, UFOs,
Yep.
aliens, on and on and on. And we have a wonderful thing that happens here once a year. Of course, this year it didn't happen. In Palm Springs, there's an event called Contact in the Desert, where we have people from all over the world and people get together to investigate all these topics,
Hmm.
whether it's to do with interdimensionality or whether it's to do with paranormal activities or whether it's to do with alien visitors to this planet. They it's 5 days of intensive talks and lectures. It's the 5 best days of my life of the year.
It would be nectar for me. It would be. I
It's
mean, I
so
get to interview
spiritual.
people where we will astral,
Yeah.
travel on the show, so to speak, where we talk
Yeah.
about
Oh,
that, and it's always when I manage to get into that kind of conversation with somebody, I'm at home,
oh
you know.
yeah. Yeah.
And and the interesting thing is, when quantum physics kind of came more into the thing, I remember somebody who was very scientific. And he was talking about spirituality and quantumness. And I said, well, surely spirituality is just a higher frequency that you can now measure. And he goes, yes,
Mm-hmm.
we can now actually measure the people that are actually on a higher hertz,
Oh
a
yeah.
higher hertz of love, a higher hertz of consciousness.
Right.
And we actually understand that this whole thing of stepping into love
Yeah.
and living in a spiritual plane is not kumbaya or
No.
cultish. It's
Yeah.
just people living on a higher vibration, on a higher plane,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes. Totally. Yeah, that's exactly what happens. Yes, of
Yeah,
course.
and so they can now measure it. So it's no longer kind of the hoo-ha, which of course it does aggravate me when I see TV shows that take anybody that is spiritual or has a gift and tries to make them cultish or
Yeah.
evil, and it's
Oh, of course. But that's the fault of Hollywood.
yes,
That's what they do, and it's a great shame
yes,
that
it is.
that very little of this is taken seriously,
Right.
and every now and again comes along a little gem where it is taken seriously,
Yeah.
and we need more of that. And I'm actually working on a screenplay, not a screenplay, a novel at the moment, where I'm hoping to address this topic because, uh, and first of all, most people don't even think about this stuff because it's denied. They're not
Yeah.
denied access to them.
Yes.
And I want to be able to. We got to spread our vision. We got to widen our vision.
Please, please, we are not just
No,
matter.
no,
There is a wonderful scene in Doctor Strange. Have you seen that?
yes,
Now, the scene where she pushes him out of the body and says, "What
yeah,
do you think you are? Just matter?"
yes, yes,
And
exactly.
and I've, oh, thank you
Yeah.
for putting this in a superhero movie,
Oh yeah, yeah,
and then him traveling everywhere. That's really what it is like,
yeah.
folks.
And the problem is that one is reticent to even talk about these topics because so many people will label you as, oh my God, uh, you know.
I
So
don't care.
So I don't go there. I'll be very, very careful with who I discuss this with. But
Mm.
there is a group here called UPARS, which stands for Unidentified Phenomena and Paranormal Research Society of Los Angeles. UPARS LA, it's called, and we meet once a month. And it's a wonderful group that investigates all this kind of thing, including Bigfoot and
Hmm.
but haunted houses and all of that stuff. It's all part of the fabric of this universe, which is a very, very strange and wonderful place. And
And who thinks that, this
we've got to
humanness?
broaden our vision. We've got
Yes,
to broaden our vision. And
yes.
that's one of the reasons why I wrote one of my books, which we'll talk about when later on
In the
uh,
second part.
in the second part, where I investigate all of these because I have found this to be the case. And yet, most people will laugh at you when and people don't want to talk about it. But you've got to break that barrier.
Yes,
This is what the universe is about. It's not
yes.
about this. It all goes beyond the garden gate, for God's sake. So let's go there.
Well, I mean, to arrogantly think that us humans are the supreme race and
Uh,
that we are it,
yeah.
when we are so narrow-minded
Oh yes, of
and
course.
when we're still so divided, when we still choose to feed hate and
Yeah.
loathing and division,
Yeah.
and ego,
Yeah.
and narcissism, it's we have one of the greatest gifts given to us
Hmm.
to uh, to experience the sensation
Yeah.
of the universe within the body,
Of course.
the ability to touch, to taste, to hold,
Yes.
to
Exactly.
move. I mean, it is a gift if you are aligned with your spirit, because then you truly understand what the human body is here to experience, what you're here
Yes.
to do.
Hmm.
And it is, I don't know why people would deny themselves this, because
Hmm.
it is truly a wonderful place to be. I really find it very hard to live as a human being sometimes,
Yeah.
because I am more of a spiritual being.
Yes.
But it is so wonderful when I do get to speak with somebody that is there or is traveling there, is open to being there,
Oh,
because
totally.
now we're going to be dancing on a different frequency altogether, and that's wonderful.
Of course. Absolutely. And unfortunately, it's denied in our culture.
Yes,
It doesn't exist. And in our education system doesn't exist. And there's nonsense about parents. A little child may say to the mother, "Oh, mommy, look, there's somebody standing over there." And the mother looks, and of course, there's no one there.
right.
And the mother says, "Oh no, don't imagine. You're imagining it, sweetheart. Don't. That's not the thing to say. The
No,
thing that the parent should say is, oh, describe her to me, and
yeah,
what's his or her name.
yeah,
Allow that to open up and unfold instead of squashing it and killing it
right.
when we're in our childhood, because we'll grow up with it closed to us.
I mean, and that was, my case in many ways. I was a very sickly child. So I spent many, many weeks and months on my own at home where, I get breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but then the rest of the time I'm pretty on my own. And
Yeah.
I play with my dolls and play with other things. And my mum would come in and who are you talking to? Well, Jane there, don't you see her?
Yeah, of
What do you
course.
mean you don't see her? It's clear daylight, and it's well, it must be the fever. you know?
Must be the
um,
fever. Yeah.
but it was always a challenge for me, because I didn't understand why other people couldn't see it and feel it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's why I think I'm drawn to movies, definitely, that take us
Mm.
onto a different place. May the force be with you.
Yes, of
You
course.
know,
Yeah.
we're asking that, may that higher frequency be with you, of clarity, of
Absolutely.
consciousness.
Yeah.
That's where you open up.
Yeah.
The scene where it said, these are not the droids you're looking for.
Yes.
When I lived in Hillbrow in Johannesburg, it was an extremely violent time. And
Mm.
I worked in a steakhouse there, and I used to come home at 4 or 5 in the morning,
Hmm.
and I would go down a one-way street, and these cars would stop, wanting to pick me up. And I go, I'm not the girl you're looking for. Okay. Off they would go. The only time it didn't work is if somebody was extremely high or extremely drunk. you know, then that was different, because you couldn't get through to them. But it worked. It worked. And why are we depriving ourselves of this? We love these movies that take us to another plane.
Of
We
course.
love these movies that take us into another dimension. We love these movies that show us there's so much more than who we are as human beings. But
Hmm.
why are we so afraid to be that person?
Yeah. Yes, of course. I don't know whether you've had it in Canada. I'm sure you have access to it. Stranger Things, a
Oh,
big.
I've watched all of that.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
So you'd probably like those as well.
Oh yeah, I like all of that type of thing.
Like all of that.
The Umbrella Academy and all of that type of thing. Yes. Yeah, I do because it's yeah, I do believe there is evil in the world, but I believe it's an evil energy as
Hmm.
opposed to devil. I think the devil can be in anyone if you feed that.
Hmm.
It's the evil actions. It's the energy that is corruptive or most certainly harmful.
Hmm.
I was body snatched when I was young, so I do know what that's like. It took four people to hold me down, and so these things are real. I used to be scared to talk about them, wondering if the white coats were coming to take me away, but
Or
not
the men in
anymore.
black, or the men in black.
Oh, yes. Oh, I love the Men in Black. I loved the way they would show, the Star magazine, and you would see, what was his name, Rodney, whatever, the football player, and go, oh yeah, he's one of them. And I love the play on it, but at the same time, yeah, that makes sense. Because some of these people just don't seem to be from this planet.
There are many who are not from this planet.
Yeah.
But there is a purpose of evil and
Mm.
darkness, and that is
Yes.
it pushes us towards the light.
Yes.
That's its function.
And find the light within us
Yeah, that's
and
its
be at
mission.
home within the darkness with us.
Yeah,
I'm quite happy to be in the darkness on my own because I know I am the light.
yes. I
But it
mean,
took me a while to
that
realize that.
whole yin and yang symbol embodies that.
Yes.
You have to have both to have the whole, because
Yes.
one makes the other one real, and the darkness is the function of that is to keep pushing us towards the light on our cosmic journey. That's what
Yes.
its function is.
Yeah. And understand that the darkness is the contour of the shapes.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we just have bright light and be blinded. You need the darkness as the shading. And that's why in black and white movies, when you
Well, that's
see it,
exactly right.
yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I was going to use that as the
Mm.
analogy, and you got there before I did. One of the secrets is one of the secrets of good lighting, particularly in film noir, black and white, is not about how you light the scene, but
Mm.
where you don't light it,
Yes.
because that's what gives you the contrast. Good
Yes.
lighting is not the presence of light; it
Right.
is the absence of it,
Yeah.
because then you have that contrast and you can see, it gives you that comparison. So yeah, I mean, the negative makes the positive more real,
Right.
more full,
Yes.
and elevates it.
Yeah. And that's really what we're wanting. I mean, that's really what movies and books. My brother is um, a writer. He's a novelist. He's a screenwriter.
Hmm.
And, like you, from a child, for him, writing was there right from the word go.
Yeah.
Love of words, which is very much on my mother's side, and looking at the ancestry, is words were very much part of that. And he's written many different types of books, but he went through a phase of youth genre books.
Yes.
Uh, and he is a really good person for taking his quote into the twilight zone,
Yes.
of how the metaphysical can come in. And he did one, um, repercussions of Thomas D, of a young boy talking on the phone to his friend and ending up in World War II
Oh
in
yeah.
England,
Uh,
just having gone through kind of a wormhole,
uh,
and then spilling his guts to a guy there who actually works for Nazis and changing the course of history.
oh wow, interesting.
And it just shows how one person with the right information, how it can change everything.
Mm,
um, but it's and a future with no cell phones, no TV, no movies,
yeah.
no books, so it, he has a wonderful imagination. He's no good at business in marketing himself, but he has a wonderful imagination. Uh,
Where is he?
he's in London,
Uh-huh.
well, actually in Lincolnshire. Um,
Yeah.
but when he writes, when I read his writings, he takes me into other worlds, and he
Mm,
has a very, very good way of multidimensionaling it and
mm,
having you anxious to go and explore the next dimension.
uh-huh.
Which I think is a gift. You were given the gift of movie making. He was given the gift of writing, and I
Mm,
think if we embrace what our gifts are
mm-hmm.
and really nourish them, we will actually really thrive in what our gift is and what we bring to people.
Yeah. One would like to believe that, of course, and that's exactly what one must do. Yeah, don't ignore your gifts. You know, if you have that. I mean, I have a couple of I'm blessed with 7 grandchildren. I have two
I've got
children,
one on the way.
one on the way.
First one on the way.
On the way. Good. Congratulations. When
Thank
is it
you.
due?
March.
Okay, lovely. And where is that? Where will the child be? In Canada?
It's actually on the island. I'm on Victoria Island in
Oh, so
Canada.
you will be able to see your
An
grandson.
hour and a half away. Yes.
You're very fortunate because I have 2 children who live in London, and so I have 3 grandchildren in London who I can't see now,
Right.
and the eldest one is 13 already. I can't believe that, but you know I haven't been able to see them for some time because of this lockdown nonsense. And then I have 2 grandchildren in Chicago, and I have 2 in San Francisco. So they're all far away from me.
Yeah.
I can't. I would love to be able to see them and
Yes.
impart some of this to these kids.
Yes.
You know, that with the stuff that we've been talking about,
Mm.
I want them to be aware of all of this. And it's hard when they're not near you, you know. But anyway, I'm not sure.
They get to listen to this.
Yeah, I'm not sure how we got onto this topic, but there we are. Yeah. Oh, I do know why. Because 2 of my grandchildren are particularly aware. Actually, 3 of them. And in fact, my daughter sent me a little poem, a little song that my grandson wrote yesterday. He's 9, and he wrote this. Just listen to this. Let me think of something harder than life. Death is easy to collide and shaking up your spine. When will the eclipse end? Always ask between life, is void ethereal and is death eternal? This child is 9.
Wow.
When I see the darkness, I think of it as a life in a new world. Maybe you see it too. I think I have a line through my heart thinking of you. I can't change the past in our souls, but together we can change the world. Where does this come from? This comes from a 9-year-old child, you
Yes.
know, and it goes on and on and on. So, you know, he's one of them. And then my granddaughter in England, she also is like that. And you know, these kids just stun me. Maybe these are the indigo children. I don't
I
know.
definitely do believe that they're already, the energy already shifted, for
Yeah,
them at birth, and they're born into a different energy plane.
I think so. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. I mean, the
So,
youngest I interviewed was 10, who'd written a book, 365 Days of Gratitude with a Positive Attitude.
yeah.
And I was expecting to have to maybe kind of, dumb my show down, talk to her in a different way. And no, I mean, she just made sense. She said, well, I don't understand. If what you're doing is make you unhappy, why don't you simply stop and go and find something that makes you happy? And it's like, duh, why do we have to complicate things so much as adults, right? But it's I've interviewed an awful lot of young people in their early 20s, and I know they're future leaders. And the beautiful thing they've got is they've got a core common sense,
Mm.
a core understanding and passion and conviction for
Yeah.
what they're representing.
Mm.
And it speaks even louder than their voice. And you just know when you're interviewing them, these are the people that are going to lead the next generation,
Yeah.
that generation. And we're in good hands with people like that, with people like a grandson.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
we need to, because look what we've done.
Yeah. No, no, I absolutely agree with that. And I love being around young people.
Hmm.
And I have implicit faith and absolute faith in young people. I don't waste my time anymore with anybody over the age of 35. I don't even go into these areas anymore. It's the youth. Those
Yes.
are the people who are going to change things. Anybody
Yes.
over the age of 30, they're set in their ways. They don't want to know any other way. They don't want any difference. And so don't waste my time. Let's just leave it alone. I
Well,
mean,
I'm privileged to interview the people that are beyond 35,
uh-huh.
and like Esther Schifrin, I've had her on 3 times, and
Yes.
and the Pink Lady, um, who's 88, so 83 and 88, and they're such an example of
They are
life.
exceptions. They are exceptions. You see,
Yes,
most
yeah,
people are not like that.
no, the common not, but when older people see other older people,
Mm.
instead of kind of being complacent, well, this is like the end now, I'm just going to sit there knitting, instead of like, oh,
Yeah,
I can now do what I want to do,
of
what I'm
course.
passionate
Yeah,
about doing it, and I don't care what my age is. It
yeah,
becomes that wake up call to people. What, like life isn't over yet? No, it
absolutely.
isn't.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You've got to celebrate it, of course. Absolutely. And
And of course, we're seeing that more in TV shows and movies, where we're seeing
mm,
older people, like Helen Mirren,
Mm-hmm.
and not Lionel Richie. Oh gosh, his name is right there. I can see his face, but a number of people. I mean, right now, Christopher Plummer is on a TV show,
Yes, he's
right?
incredible. He's amazing. He's just
Yes.
extraordinary.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
I
we've
think,
just lost Sean
what,
Connery,
he's
but
90, I think, Plummer. I think he's, isn't he? Is
I
he
think
not?
he's easily in that, and he's still
Yeah,
so eloquent and everything else. And the thing is, in the past,
yeah,
basically, Greta Garbo at 30, well, my career's finished now. I'm too old.
yeah,
Now we're embracing that age and understanding the gift that they bring to us,
yeah.
right? And it's opened up those doors so much more. And I think that when the youth are ready to listen and to
Mhm.
learn, there's a lot to be learned from people that are over 35.
Well, that's so true. Unfortunately, they are not encouraged to do that, and certainly not in this culture. Youth
Yeah.
don't listen to the elderly people because they don't know what they're talking about.
Yes.
Is the state of mind with most people.
And of course, with COVID, it's like, well, they can die for us,
Yeah, they
right?
can die.
So, yeah, yeah.
And
No, I ain't dying for you, baby.
yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I've still got too much to do.
Well, when you're talking about the Pink Lady and you talk about Esther, you're talking about two extraordinary people.
Yeah,
And there are others I know like that, but they really are the exception. There aren't, most people are not like that. There comes a time when you think, oh my God, I'm 70 years old, it's done.
yeah,
That's an allotted period. That's
yes.
what the Bible says. I've been allotted. Now I'm on borrowed time. Well, I'm on borrowed time. I'm 7 years into borrowed time already, but it's by no means the end of things. And I mean,
No,
I was talking to my doctor the other day, and he says his mother is 104. She
right.
she drives.
Yes,
She she does her own shopping,
yes.
and it's wonderful.
I live with an 87-year-old that would still be working if her job was available right now. She
Ah,
still drives. She's out there every day. She's stronger than I am.
yeah.
She is stronger than I am. And just, I mean, yeah, short-term memory is going. So I
Mm-hmm,
have to step in with that. But, other than that, she's all there.
mm,
And it's, what is this thing that you have an expiry date? No.
no.
It's until the very end, get out and live. And if the movies don't show us that, I think we're no longer really titillated by
Yeah.
the perfect supposed image of what beauty is.
Mm-hmm,
We've watched all these reality shows, housewives, this, that, etc., and go, how real is this? I mean, no, if this is real, I don't want it.
yes,
you know
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
we're hungry for show me somebody like Helen Mirren, like Sophie Loren, like um, Maggie Smith, Judy Dench.
Mm.
I love them because there's so much who they are,
Well, they
but
said
there's
all of these women that you've mentioned, they're all extraordinary, amazing,
yes,
wonderful
yes,
people. Yeah.
and a wonderful example. And so it's no, it isn't. I keep wanting to come back to that guy's name and I can't come to it. It will come to me.
Well,
Friedman. Lionel, not, is it Lionel Friedman? No, 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 it's you. He
what's he
played
done?
God. He played God.
He played God.
Black gentleman.
Oh, anyway, all right, that guy.
Yes, yeah, he has wonderful speaking voice. But and you looked
Oh,
at.
Morgan Friedman, you talk.
Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you, thank
By
you.
the way, Morgan Freeman has got one of the most marvelous voices
Ah,
as a
yes,
narrator.
yes.
There's an extraordinary film made by a friend of mine in New York. It was an IMAX film called Cosmic Voyage. And
Hmm.
basically, years and years ago, there was a wonderful documentary made in, I think it was French, called The Power of 10, which started with a child standing in a playground, and you step back 10 times, 10 times, 10 times away from the Earth until you see the whole of the cosmos, and then you go back to this child in the playground, and now you go into the micro world 10 times. The Power of 10 was an extraordinary film made black
Yeah,
and white, French, and this Bailey Silic remade this in IMAX called Cosmic Voyage, where you have these children playing in a playground in, I think, in Holland, and then you step back 10 times, and every time you step back it's the power of 10, so it's to the 10th power,
yeah,
and until eventually you go right back and you see as much of the known universe. The film was made, I think, in the 80s. It was nominated for an Academy Award. It should have won. It didn't, and I don't know why. But anyway, that's beside the point. Um, and it's an extraordinary film. And Morgan narrated that film, and he did the most extraordinarily wonderful job. If you ever want to be immersed in the most beautifully told tale of the majesty and the magic and the marvels of the universe in which we live, take a look at Cosmic Voyage, narrated by Morgan Freeman. It's wonderful. I've just bought a copy for my daughter in Chicago. I said, you show that to your two boys. I know they'll be amazed by it. It is a little dated because since the film was made, we've discovered more about the universe than was
Right.
known at the time when it was made. We now know about all these exoplanets, which
Hmm.
are Earth-like. At that time, they didn't even know that when they made the film. And of course, we've now seen even deeper into the universe through Kepler and some of these other wonderful um, um, telescopes in space. But the film still works because it gives you a sense of scope and size and wonderment. And
Yeah.
Morgan, he nails it. It's bam, it's incredible.
I have to look that up. It also brings to me mind a book that had an influence on me, which was Celestial Prophecy.
Yes.
And it really is the energy that you feed something is the way it's going to grow.
Yeah.
And I interviewed Yashiyuki, who was the Emoto assistant to Emoto of the Three Glasses of Water.
Yes.
The negative water that turned black, the
Yes.
water ignored, and the water of love turned into crystal, which
His
we
work,
are
his work is amazing, that man.
absolutely amazing. And Yashiyuki is keeping it on, keep going with it. And it's
Yeah.
and I've had him on with Robin Williams from the Beach Boys, who's also brought up this one love. It's to do with water, and we are water.
Yeah.
This
Of course.
planet is water, and
Yeah.
we need to understand that
Uh-huh.
frequency of keeping our water positive. And
Mm,
it's not a la la type thing. And I think this is also why we're kind of hungry for movies and tales and things like this that show
mm,
us how to
mm.
feed the possible and not get drawn into the negative.
When you talk about water and you consider the history of things like baptism and
Mm,
the use of water in Oriental religious paths, and so on, and the role of water, every molecule in the water has its own consciousness.
yes,
It does.
yes,
And it's all about vibration.
yes.
It has every molecule has its own consciousness.
And it's
You
such an
you
incredible
you
conduit.
can you can actually influence that water by imparting, to you what this man did. It's absolutely extraordinary, and I've seen some of it myself done by some African healers.
Mhm.
It's extraordinary how they can change things, and I believe this. I immerse myself in a ritual bath once a week, um, because I know that water has incredibly cleansing and elevating capabilities.
Yes,
It does.
yes,
It really does.
yes. It really does. And while I'm in the shower, I like to use tapping.
Hmm.
Because tapping on the meridian points, you're speaking to something, and that water just running down you,
Yeah.
that cleansing, that soothing, that calming.
Yeah.
But water is a conduit, and the air is a kind of a generator. It constantly has you moving forward. The thing is, we have everything we need. It's just how do we utilize it
Yeah.
in the right way with the gift that we've been given, that
Yeah.
we maybe are unaware of, that we need to get aware of.
Yeah. That's right. Mhm.
So we've talked about your career and everything and gone off into the twilight zone, which I love as well. And our second part is going to be on the books that you have written. And one of them, which is quite fascinating because Netflix has made a movie on it, but you've called it Full Service, and it was written by you on Scotty Bowers. Just give people a little snippet of that so they can come back and listen to the second show on that.
You want to? Do we start now?
Nope, just I want to just do an exit so people can come back and
Okay.
listen to the full amount.
Okay. Very good. So I'll do that. So you want to end this first?
No, no, no. Just want you to kind of tell me a little something about what we're going to be speaking about in the next show.
Okay. So if you want to start with the full service with the Scotty Bars
Mhm.
story, because that's the first book, and that did become the New York Times bestseller. We can start with that, and I'll tell about how I met this guy. I'll introduce the audience to this man, and the fact that he is a legend in Hollywood in so many ways, and where that went, and then we can go on to the other books, um, all of which I have copies of here, and I'll even show you what Scotty looked like. I have a picture of him for you.
Excellent. So I want people to come back and listen to the author side of you and all of these books, etc. But, for those that are listening just to this show before they come back and listen to the second one, how can they get hold of you and find all these books and more about you?
I do have a website, and it's very easy to find. Just type in my name, Lionel Friedberg. That's Lionel Fried, like fried, and then Berg. So it's lionelfriedberg.com, and that'll take them straight to my website. And there is a box there where they can send a message to me, or there's an email address. But the website basically tells them all about some of the things we've been talking about, and a lot more, and promotes all of these books. And I'd be happy to hear from anybody who wants to be in touch with me.
Excellent, wonderful. And please stay tuned for the second one that is coming up. And this is where we're going to be talking about the books, and you definitely want to hear about them. The three very different books. One all about the sexual exploits in Hollywood, from a true story from Scotty. One about the airlines in South Africa, and the other one is to do with the Forever in My Veins, which is sounding very, very intriguing as well. So please come back and listen to the books and let us learn even more from Lionel about this wonderful, wonderful place of storytelling, whether it's through books, through movies, through documentaries. Storytelling is something that really does guide us through life. And it invites us, it excites us, it inspires us. And for somebody who has done as much as you have done, it's definitely an inspiration. So thank you, Lionel. And we'll be back with the second one shortly.
Thank you, Sarah.
Bye for now, folks. We hope you enjoyed the show. We look forward to bringing you more shows. Please go to selfdiscoverymedia.com/shows, and you will see the incredible lineup of genres and shows that we have for you. We are here to make a difference in your life. Thank you for listening.